Hi, this is David McCann for WebTNG. In this video, I'm taking a look at Unblock, a new Gutenberg-based builder for WordPress. Unblock is from the same developer as WP Grid Builder. WP Grid Builder is a very useful and well-respected plugin, so when Unblock was announced, it got my attention. What I'm going to do in this video is take a quick look at the Unblock website, then do a walkthrough and look at the user interface and the features of Unblock so you have an idea of what it brings to the table. And then at the end of the video, we'll have some discussion and conclusions. This is the Unblock website here, UnblockWP.com. Unblock has a pretty great feature list. You see it has a visual panel and CSS inspector that's kept in sync. It has good support for dynamic data. There's an AI assistant option where you bring your own key. There are editors for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Pretty flexible query loop option. And other features such as comes with 13 blocks. We'll talk about that in a minute. Very good conditional display options, full responsive design, support for custom fields. Currently, I think ACF is supported. I'm not sure if WooCommerce support is ready yet. It has some built-in form support. This is more like the ability to build your own forms. It's very performant, and it has hooks for developer extendability. One thing I wanted to mention is down in the feature list, it said there were 13 blocks, but here it says one block. And what that is that HTML element blocks are built on the same foundation. And then there are other attributes and features on top of that to customize it for the different elements. So that's what that means. If we look at the pricing, there's currently a lifetime option for $349 for 1,000 sites, which has all inclusive, all the features. It says here that that's a 30% discount now, and then pretty soon on June 10th, that 30% will go to 15%, and then on July 15th, it'll go up to $499. There are annual plans here for $69 for one site, 10 sites $149, and 100 sites $299. If we go and look at the docs for Unblock are good, which is unusual for a brand new builder. So there's a lot of good information. One thing I'll mention is that Unblock uses Twig syntax for its dynamic data and for its conditions and expressions. Many people are familiar with, and which is pretty easy to learn or pick up. If you're not familiar with it, there's a lot of information about Twig online. So those are the docs. Now I have here a test site. This is the 2025 theme. So we go to the dashboard. We're on WordPress 7, and we go to plugins. You'll see I have the Unblock plugin installed. I've added the license key. You'll note that it's on beta 2, so it hasn't gone to version 1 release yet. Things may change as a result of that. Now, another interesting thing here to note is that when you have Unblock installed, there is no admin menu here like you would normally expect. I'll show you that you get to the admin or place where you enter your license and other options inside of Gutenberg. I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, one thing before we make the next step is, remember, we're still on the 2025 theme. This is what the sample page looks like. Okay, now we go to themes, and the Unblock recommendation is that you use the Unblock theme, which is basically a blank theme. And the documentation says you can use other themes and they'll probably work. But when I see a developer say it'll probably work, that generally means that it hasn't been tested and you're kind of on your own. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and activate Unblock theme. Okay, now let's go to the front end. This is what the site looks like now. And we go to that page, the sample page, and look at that. And this is what that looks like. Okay, so the styling that comes with most themes is absent in Unblock. That's what I meant by it was a blank theme. And basically the idea is you're going to bring the styles. If we go to the site editor, the Unblock theme is a block theme. We look at the patterns. You'll see there is a header, but it's an empty template. Footer is also empty. And then these are the default templates that come with the theme, so you'll see there's not a lot of styling there. Okay, so let's go out now and let's add a page, and I'll publish it. Okay, this is the AI assistant, the Unblock AI assistant. It has 3 tabs, one for building, one for design, and one for content. Okay, so that's kind of nice. And this is, I believe, built on top of the WordPress 7 AI connector options. So when you start here, you install the base plugin, or you can install these and it'll install the base plugin for you. But if you go to the WordPress plugin directory, here's Claude and Gemini and OpenAI, you'll find there are connectors for other AI models. Now, this is the main Unblock UI area. And here you can import, export, and you can enter your license. Now, these are selectors, like they can be classes or they can just be HTML elements that you style. Here are CSS variables that you enter. Here in my testing, I was building a header for a site, and so this is the CSS that I added for that. Here are variables. I added a variable for color. These are @rules for your responsive design. Here are the font options. You can use Google Fonts or upload your own fonts. And the CSS parser, this is cool. This is where you can paste in some CSS, like your own set of selectors and variables, and Unblock will parse those and add them in for your own framework here. The CSS parser is a nice feature also. Then here are the blocks that come with Unblock. There's a section block, which is full width and contains a container in it, which is constrained to a width. There's container, there's div, there's image, iframe, which I think is a little unusual in a very limited set of blocks. This would be one they'd have. There's SVG, which is for code-based SVGs, anchor, heading, paragraph, text, loop, condition, and variable. All right, so these are the blocks that come with Unblock. If we add a section, you see here is the container. Let's go and look at the overview. Here's the container here. Inside of that, we might add, for example, an image, and you'll notice when I add whether it's a section or the image here, so you add the image here. Now notice that even though container was selected, it did not go inside the container, which would be a little bit easier, I think, for me if it did. Now from here, if I add another block, just click and add another block, it will come into the container. But note, when you add a block, then you get these editors down here. There's a JavaScript, an HTML, and a CSS editor. Automatically generates some style class there, which you can rename. Here it's put the image in a figure tag. Most people probably won't use the JavaScript editor as much as the HTML and CSS editor. There's currently no way to hide that, though I believe that's planned. However, you can make it as small as possible and rearrange it. This is kind of cool. Now we have the image here. This is the element block. It was saying one block. And if we go over to the block options, you'll see these are the inputs, the style and layout inputs that Unblock provides. You can here change the HTML tag, which is nice. You can set an ID or a class. You can set styles for desktop, tablet, mobile. You can add your own CSS selector here. I don't know if we wanted to call it page featured image. Then it will bring that into the CSS editor there. You can search for the controls. You can turn on advanced settings or classic settings. If we go up to the container, for instance, well, let's go ahead here and let's add a heading, and we'll say this is a test heading. Okay, and so here it is in the HTML. Let's say that we wanted color red. All right, so we've added that in using the code. But if we go into the typography area, we see that it's synced that, so that's very cool. If we change that and say to a blue, then, whoops, or purplish color, then that is synced across there as well. Right? Another kind of interesting thing here is in the container. If we go to layout, it says flex there, but we don't have all the flex box options. This is the default flex, but what you actually have to do is select flex from the drop down, and then you get all of the flex box options. Okay, so just something to be aware of. It's column, we'll have it go row. Let's turn this off and see how that's different. Okay, then we have, instead of the drop down, we have the icons. So for gap, I guess we can put in to rim, or we can go to our variables and we can add a collection called sizing or spacing. Let's call it spacing. And we can then add a variable. So we'll call it gap medium, and we'll enter the value to rem. And you'll note that it has this type option. Like if we look at the color, it says type color. So this is how Unblock decides when you do your variable pickers which ones to show. It shows by context based on the type. So if you're in a color picker, it's going to show the color options. If you're in a place for string or link or number or ratio, whatnot, it's going to show those. So these categories are just for your use and they don't go elsewhere. Now notice I lost my variable here. I think I didn't save it. Let's see, to rem. Is it saved? You got to go here and do add. All right, so that's a little non-obvious to me, but okay, we figured it out. Then if we go here and we remove that, then we can start typing. And there are our variables. Let's go here now. Let's add a div and let's add this heading inside of the div. And then let's add a paragraph element and let's add our dynamic data. Let's add, I think it goes like this, page.title. Is that going to render there? Let's save it. Do I have it right? I guess let's go and look. No, it did not render that, so let's go back. About post title. That's probably what we're looking for. There we go. That's the title. And so that's the kind of syntax you use for dynamic data. Let's add another block. Let's add an image block. Now you see that this image block and this image block look very much the same. The icon is a little different, but I can't really tell which one is core and which one is not core. So we're going to take this one without the sun. I guess that's the sun up there. Let's start with that one. Let's go to the media library. Let's add an image. And then below that, let's add another image. And this one will be with the sun. And we'll go to the media library. It's here, the source. So I'll choose an image and we will pick this one. All right. So here you see we don't have, this is the core one apparently. We do not have the editor windows with the Unblock ones. We do have the editor windows. This is the full content here. This is the source set that you would see on the front end. All right, let's go and look at this a little bit more. Let's go to our container, our div. Let's drag this image out. So we have the two of them side by side here. And save. And now let's go to the front end and refresh. A couple of things here. One is that you note that we're full width here. This is because we need to go into the site editor and create our template. Here are the two images. Currently they look the same. I want to show you one thing, and that is what happens if we deactivate Unblock and then we go back to our page and view it. The only thing we see here now is the core block that we added, because everything else was an unblocked block. So that's something to be aware of. These are third-party blocks, they're not core blocks. Let's go to the editor. Let's go to the templates. Here is the default page template. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add the unblock section. We'll bring that up in between the header and footer. We will add in our section, in our container, the title, and we'll add the content. So these are the core blocks there. We'll save. And now if we go back and look at our page, so now the layout is a little better, more as we would expect. If we go back and edit the page, you see that the layout is a little bit different. And this is because these elements are not inside a section, the core image and the unblock image. Okay, but it shows that way on the front end because in the template I used an unblock section and put all the content inside the container. So that's a little something, I don't know, it might be my fault here for using an unblock section in the site editor, what that is. But before we continue, I wanted to show you these other blocks. So these are the element blocks. We've kind of looked at some of those. Let's look at, here's the if condition. That functions like a container. A lot of Gutenberg block collections, they have a visibility or display condition panel, and you select the display condition from a list and you're constrained to what the developer has made available. Then this is a container, and what you put inside of it will show if the condition is true. And so you would set your twig display condition here. So that's a lot more powerful and flexible, but you would need to get the proper syntax for that from the docs or from the twig documentation. Okay, so that's the if block. Let's look real quick at the variable block. Okay, and what this does is it allows you to name a query or an expression and to save that and reuse it or reference it elsewhere. So that's what the variable block is for. And then finally, let's kind of remove these things here. And let's get rid of this. Okay, so finally the loop block. Okay, so let's do that. Let's add a container inside the loop block. I don't think it did that. All right, and then we go over to our loop. So this is what your query name is. This is the alias. And you want to use whatever you're going to use there for referencing for getting the data. Okay, if we go to the documentation for query loop, here's some sample that we can use. There is no way really to expand this out, all right? But we want to look at not posts, but we want to look at books. I think it's called books. It's book or books. We'll see in a minute. And so return no item, so I've got the wrong name. It's book. Okay, is what the custom post type is called. Good. Now let's add in an image. Put that inside the container. And our image is going to be the post thumbnail. All right, and see, it's called post. We put this prefix post because that is the alias or name of our query. If I put book or bulk reviews or something, then we would be using that. All right, so on the image, we can set the width and the height. Then we can add in heading, and here we would say post title. Oops. All right. It is interesting that each time it renders one of these things kind of reset a little bit. They're still, I think, there. Our size is still there. But anyway, this gives you an idea then how to use the loop element. So that's a look at the user interface and the blocks. Give you an idea of Unblock. So now for some discussion and conclusions. We just learned about Unblock a month ago. It is already so well developed and built out. These days it seems like the bar is so high that new tools have to be fully formed even when they come out in alpha or beta. And as a reminder, remember that this is still a beta that we're looking at. So some pros and cons. Pros first. Unblock is tightly coupled, leveraging the site editor for templates and the block editor layout that people are already familiar with. The panel to add and manage your variables is tightly integrated into WordPress and Gutenberg and to the option inputs and editors. There's a good set of block style and layout options, something we've come to expect now from modern builders, but that we don't usually see inside of Gutenberg. The values entered track with the CSS and HTML. There's a two-way sync between the panel with the editors and the block options. And that's pretty cool because you could work from either end. I like those editors. We can see exactly what's going to be rendered. There's nothing extra added. It's very performant. There is good dynamic data support. Unblock uses Twig, and one of the benefits of using Twig type syntax shows up when you're creating the display conditions. You aren't limited by a developer's preset list of conditional display options. It's very flexible and powerful. You can add your own statement there. So those are some of the pros. Now some of the cons. We saw a number of small glitches and inconsistencies where something would be lost or the rendering would shift back and forth. There is currently a very limited set of blocks. The ones that are there are a good foundation, but people will need more options. Although there's the option to import in a list of variables and selectors, getting started is kind of difficult. And that is especially true because there's no pattern library. There's no starter, default, or child theme based header, footer layouts. So you're really kind of starting from scratch all the way around. But let's remember that this is a beta, and all those cons I just mentioned, the developer is going to address all of those in the coming weeks and months. So those are temporary issues now just because we're dealing with a beta. However, there are two other possible things that came to my mind. The first isn't a technical one with the editor itself. It's the name, Unblock. I happened to go onto YouTube to search to see if the developer had released any videos yet about Unblock, and it was very difficult to find anything because all of the videos using that keyword unblock were about blocking users that had been locked out or email addresses that have been blocked or things like that. So that is a possible issue, but not a technical one. On the technical side, I showed that the unblock blocks and the core blocks look very similar. You can't tell the difference between them in the block picker. A number of block collections, they'll give their blocks a little different color or maybe a small icon or something to distinguish them, so you can see right away what you're using. I think the initial thought, the hope of the developer, is that the unblock blocks will just replace the core blocks. Wouldn't it be nice not to have to use the inconsistencies and poor block option layout UI of core blocks? Yes, it would be. However, as we mentioned, there are currently a limited set of blocks. But also, if you use the unblock blocks for Gutenberg content, then you're in the position where there might be some lock-in. Best practices usually with builders are that you create the templates with the builder, but you create your content with Gutenberg because that will be supported going forward. There's less likely to be any lock-in. And as I showed, when you deactivate the Unblock plugin, you lose all your content. So that's something I hope that the developer can address some way. But anyway, those are the pros and cons. Now for a couple of other points. I did look at the price and the plan of the developer to stage raising the price over a few weeks here and a month there. Seems a little aggressive given some of the limitations and glitches that are still there, but also because Unblock is new, and I think there's a little danger if you raise the price too quickly, it might slow down adoption. But anyway, that's the price consideration that came to mind. The final point, I think, is that as a builder, Unblock is pretty nice. It's carried the torch a little bit further than other builders in many ways. So this is a good one to take a look at yourself to see if it matches the type of workflow you want and the type of sites that you develop. So that's my first look at Unblock. There's a text version of the video available on the WebTNG website. If you like the video, if you got something out of it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. It makes a big difference. Thank you for watching.